go on the road. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Tech Report podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Drake. I'm joined by Scott Wasson and Cyril Kowalski. Mr. Jeff Gager is taking something. I think he's taking like some sort of cottage tour of Ukraine. I don't know. It's something weird. It was like a bagel tour of Latvia or something. It was like all the best. No. Is that a latke tour of Israel? Bagel tour, I don't know. It was something food and Eastern European related. He's off. He's doing his thing. Maybe it involves an Ironman at some point. Maybe he has to carry villagers up to a well. You never know with Jeff. But he's away, and we're going to hold down the fort, which, it's going to make the episode a little bit shorter. Let's be honest. Jeff talking is at least 70% of the episode. An episode that I don't have to just really just dive into the Jeff audio just to cut down on all the talking. This guy won't shut up. Just going on and on and on. You just won't let anyone get into word edgewise. And then every time there's a pause, he has to fill the silence. And it's just, I don't know. So maybe we'll grow without him. Maybe we'll finally fill some of the silence.
Somehow we'll get along.
That's sarcasm, folks. Jeff is one of our more soft-spoken characters, which is saying something because we're a quiet podcast. Anyway, so welcome to the official podcast of the Tech Report at techreport.com. It's the number one place for news and reviews in the computer hardware world. I'm your host in New York City. Scott Wasson is in Kansas City, Missouri, where we are headquartered. Cyril Kowalski is somewhere north, up in Canada, I think. Unclear. The pot's legal there is that's the last I heard. So, that's how that works.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be answering some listener mail on the show. We're also chatting with the folks live in the chat room at techreport.com, or excuse me, twitch.tv/techreport.
The Tech Report.
The Tech Report.
Sorry,
me.
Somebody took Tech Report.
No, it's fine. I'm really excited. We got some folks we're going to talk to tonight who are in the chat. We got Power666. We got Dancing Jack. We got U.S. Air Force Scuba. We got Sanborn84. Booger56. That's my mom, I think. She likes to join the chat a little bit.
And that's her nick usually? Is that her usual?
Yeah, well, it's usually Booger or Snit or Stinker Pot, which, by the way, and I'm not even joking, are all pet names she used for me as a kid. So,
wow.
I had a scarred childhood. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. I will say, as I usually like to start off with something that's completely untech related, I had a good meal this evening. I had Shake Shack. Shake Shack is kind of the Eastern equivalent of your In-N-Out burger. A lot of people like to put Five Guys in that category as like the In-N-Out of the East Coast. I say no. I think Five Guys is lovely. It is not anywhere near the quality I think of In-N-Out.
Wow.
Shake Shack. I'm putting it out there. Shake Shack. I had a double Smoke Shack burger, which includes bacon, melted cheese, 2 patties, a buttery bun. I like butter in my bun. Not the way that sounded. And and fries. Tasty, tasty fries. And it's a good spot when they only have one size of fry. Like, this is the way In-N-Out Burger does it. When you order the fries, you just no. They just give a little tray of fries. Shake Shack and In-N-Out Burger is the same way. They take literally the least expensive commodity in the meal, and that's what they limit for no reason at all. But supply and demand, right? Supply of the fries goes down, my belly demand goes up. So you finish all your fries, which I will be doing throughout the episode. So stay tuned for that. Jordan eats French fries in this episode. It's very exciting.
Low light.
In low lighting.
Yeah.
In my parents' basement, with my mom calling me Stinker Pot and butter in my bun. We're having a good time tonight. All right, we're going to start with some listener mail. You can email me. I don't know why you'd want to. jdrake@techreport.com. First question here is from Shane. He says, "Hi, Jordan and crew. Longtime listener, loving the podcast. It gets me through my daily commute, but I digress. Onto my question. I'm still running an ancient Radeon 6870 graphics card. I'm looking forward to a decent upgrade. With the whole 970 4GB not being 4GB, we talked about that on a previous episode, made a whole segment about it, actually. Got a lot of play online. Would you still recommend the 970? I think this is me for you, Scott. If I go with the 970, will I have a huge issue considering I'm only running a dual 1080p monitor setup? Or would you go with something like the Radeon 290 or wait for a 300 series of Radeons? Many thanks for any advice. Sincerely, Shane.
Wow. So, let's just bring up our review conclusions on the GeForce GTX 970.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. So this is our performance per dollar scatter plot, and we have the GeForce GTX 970 right here at like $339, and then a little bit lower performance, you can see, but higher price, the Radeon R9 290. What's happened in the intervening time since this review came out is the R9 290's price has gone way down over to, depending, we've seen deals around $239, but I think right now you're more likely to see them around 270, 269. The, they're but AMD has basically just cut prices, or AMD and its partners have temporarily lowered prices effectively through a series of promotions and things to get the R9 290 to be a lot less than the GTX 970. That's a card with 4 gigs of RAM, the R9 290, and it has like really 4 gigs of RAM. I don't think there's anything weird about its memory config. And the 290 is almost as fast as the GTX 970. Now, the caveat here is that if you go back to the page before, where we looked at power consumption, the power consumption under load of the R9 290 full system was around 400 watts, running Crysis 3. Running the same game, we tested the GTX 970 at 295 watts. So there's a big difference between the power consumption of those two cards. So if you're looking at just price performance, right now the Radeon R9 290 is the way to go. If you are concerned about power consumption at all, then the GTX 970 is a better choice, but you'll pay more for it. If you're worried about the GTX 970's memory config, I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the show. But you know, the short answer here to that is that, you know, that last half gigabyte of memory is still there. It's still usable, although slow, and I just don't think it's going to make a huge difference between the 970 and the R9 290 at the end of the day. Maybe off in the distant future, like a year or 2, 3 years into the life of that card, especially when you get further out, we'll have games that demand a lot more memory. You might have to do a little more tweaking in terms of turning down textures or something to get the 970 to tolerate like a really intensive game. But right now it's hard to find easy examples where a 970 stumbles with its 3.5 gig config and the R9 290 doesn't. In fact, some of the testing that I've seen where people went and looked at the difference between a 980 with 4 gigs and 970 with its weirdo 3.5/4 gig config, they actually saw that for frame times that when the 970 was strained, that because the R9 290 is a Radeon, it uses memory a little differently, it was strained too. So I don't think there's a clear performance problem with the 970 based on that memory config when you're talking competitively. If there is, we haven't established it with testing, and all the testing that we did, and you can go look at the review that we did of that card, showed it was a little faster than the R9 290. We tested it relatively high resolutions and settings. So if you're gonna run at 4K, 5K, 8K, that's a different story. But honestly, no graphics card you buy right now will do a great job of running at 4K or higher. So that's my take. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those options. It's a pretty good time to buy. The only issue is I would expect a new big chip from Nvidia and a new big chip from AMD by like mid-year, and so that probably will change the look of the market.
Do you think that they're going to finally consider introducing like a salt and vinegar chip, or was it just sort of like a tomato basil, like a sea salt?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I heard
they make those
chips.
chips. They design them up in Canada, so it'll probably be ketchup.
Or like prawn
or like a malted vinegar situation,
or
maybe
salted prawn chips, or
Yeah. Okay. Well, keep us posted on that. On the chip review, tipreview.com. From Kemal, I love your podcast. However, can you please do one simple thing to make product reviews much more useful? Are you ready for this, Scott?
I don't know if I am.
Thing.
I'm gonna
One
try.
simple thing.
One weird trick.
One weird trick that doctors hate him for discovering this. When reviewing or discussing products on your podcast, can you please, I'm adding emphasis, be sure to mention the product name frequently or at least more than once. You often mention the product name at the beginning of a review, discuss it for a long time, and then even close by saying it's time to move on without ever further identifying the subject of discussion. Again, my emphasis. When listening to the podcast, sometimes I can't be 100% focused on the content, and if I miss the initial product name, you never say it again. It's really frustrating, and I noticed this shortcoming many times. For example, in the recent Dell Venue review, you repeatedly referred to it as this tablet. It gets even more confusing when you mention other products by name more frequently, such as the Nexus 10, iPad, and Shield. When you talk for 20 minutes discussing detailed specs and I have no idea what the product is, I begin to tune out. I hope you take my suggestion to heart and keep up the good work. Sincerely, and this is the best part, his nickname is Asbestos.
Well, I mean, if you're not paying full attention during the full 90 minutes of the podcast, then,
What's wrong with you?
Is it really our fault? I mean, jeez.
Seriously, how are you not tuned into every word off of our gilded tongues for the hour and a half we throw this at you?
I know, right? I mean, jeez.
And here's the thing. If you're having a hard time catching what's being said, I got 2 words for you. Multiple listens. Give it a second go. Give it a nice, just one more round. I do that. Measure twice, cut once.
Just
pound.
listen,
Don't be
listen
pound.
to every
Don't be
podcast
pound.
constantly.
Don't be pound wise and penny foolish.
Currently, we are discussing a listener mail question from Asbestos.
We are discussing a list. That's exactly
Go
right.
ahead. Go on.
It's exact. Well, let's move on.
That was a listener mail question from Asbestos.
That was, and yes, it was. Thank you. Okay, so I think his comment is well taken. I think we could.
His being Asbestos.
Asbestos' cancer-causing comment.
He's both flame-proof and carcinogenic.
He is both of those things.
Because his name is Asbestos.
I mean, I'm living in a building from the 1930s in New York City. For all I know, there are rats and asbestos in the walls.
He's surrounding you. And by that, I mean asbestos.
Asbestos is. So this has been a conversation with Asbestos, and we're going to go talk about some other things. No, I think in all seriousness, who does he think he is? No, but also, I think that's a wise suggestion, and we're happy to throw in the names of, mentioned a few times for those who are trying to track with us. I mean, hey, I edit these things, and I get to the middle, and I'm like, I don't even know what we're talking about at this point. I'm just making the audio sound purty. That's not true. Okay, let us talk about Valve announces Steam VR, promises GDC demo. Cyril, this is your story. Now GDC is coming up. Scott, how far away are we now at this point?
It's next week, man.
Next week. So big times, good times. And we are going to get a demo of virtual reality from none other than Steam. Very exciting. Cyril, what do we know?
Not much yet. I mean, they said it's a previously unannounced hardware system. It's called Steam VR, and they're going to be doing live demos. There has been someone found a picture of a sort of an outlined VR headset looking thing on the page. So it's probably a VR headset of some sort, but that's pretty much all we know right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
Valve
I'm
was
excited.
working on VR for a while. Like, they handed off some stuff to Oculus at one point.
Right.
And they have these guys doing augmented reality, Cast AR. They're not at Valve, but former Valve people are often did a Kickstarter project and are developing some augmented reality stuff. And they're still there are these stories in the industry about the VR demo room at Valve, where it's kind of legendary as like an amazing experience. So they clearly were working on it. The thing that's weird to me is I thought they were done. I thought they kind of handed off stuff to Oculus, helped them, and then moved on to not make Half-Life 3 some more. But instead, I guess they're still working on it. So I I'd like to get a demo. It's kind of weird. The signups for the demos are for game developers and publishers, and I'm like, well, I'm a publisher of a website. Like, let me in. But I don't think they will. So I don't know. I'm going to see if we through press channels can get a chance to play around with whatever headset they have.
$100 bill slipped into the right lapel could do wonders.
Just find someone from EA and get them really drunk and steal their business card. That's the way to go.
Then actual gamers would find me, think I'm from EA, and like.
I gotta say, Cyril, coming from you, that is impressively ethical.
Well, I mean, that's how I roll.
Let's talk about what else is coming at GDC. What else are we expecting, Scott? I think we've talked about this before, but we're expecting DXL, OpenGL.
DirectX 12. There are talks on DirectX 12 from like AMD, Nvidia, Microsoft, Intel, people you never heard of. I mean, it's just it's all over the place. So there are lots of those. I've got this big agenda of all the sessions. I'm gonna try to attend as many as I can. It's really mostly like game developers talking to, or engineers at like Microsoft talking to game developers. So it's gonna be like I'll be trying to understand exactly what all they're doing, but hopefully we can get some information about what's going on there. And I think there will be a lot more good information this year because people are actually working with the code, working with the Windows preview, et cetera, et cetera. So Valve, again, is also presenting along with some other people from other companies. They're sponsoring a session on the new OpenGL. And they're touting this as sort of a cross-platform game development, graphics API for everything. So I think the idea being that maybe they unify things a little bit with regard to like what happens in mobile versus what happens on desktop systems, and that kind of thing. So that again is a DirectX 12 like reconstruction of the OpenGL graphics interface for lower overhead, working better with GPUs as they are now built, and hopefully improving performance. And then John Carmack's given a talk on virtual reality with the mobile thing he did, the Gear VR with Samsung. So I'm going to try to get into that. I'm just not sure I can, with my schedule being what it is, I can show up early enough to get a seat because it'll probably be jam-packed. And there's some other VR stuff going on. There's a lot of VR stuff going on. It's funny, Jordan, because in part because of VR, everybody's doing all this talk about reducing frame latency. Because it's a big deal now. So it's good to see that. And
so you're saying you started a revolution?
No, they're just talking about it. So
the answer to that question, Scott, is yes. Be like, yeah, all in a day's work. That's exciting, though. I mean, I think it's certainly. I feel like every year we've seen more and more VR, and we're finally getting this point, perhaps, where we're there, where we've arrived, and it can start to really mean something. Or not.
No, no, totally. I just sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about next.
Well, I tell you what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna give away a key to Homeworld Remastered.
Yeah, we're doing this right now on the website. In fact, I probably should have already passed these out, but we've got a little thread going, and we've asked people to just talk about why they should have Homeworld Remastered, and we're going to give out some keys. And I've got enough keys. I think we can also do some on the podcast here in the live stream. So what we got going is, if you're watching the stream, this is very much, you got to be on the ball here. So listen up.
Yeah,
we have keys that are coming into the Twitch chat, like as you hear this, and there will be 3 keys. And what you got to do is you got to grab them, go to Steam, and redeem the keys. And whoever redeems them first, you win.
Before you put these places in, Scott, so what I'm understanding, just so I'm clear, is this is the equivalent of a member of the French aristocracy throwing pennies into the streets of the unwashed masses, and whoever can grab the pennies first and not die gets the money. Is that kind of what we're doing here? It's sort of a mad scramble for free stuff?
That's what we're hoping for. But I'm just not sure how much death we're going to get out of it. But we're
probably disappointingly little amount.
Yeah, but we're going to give it a shot. So I think that our chat moderator, should be dropping these keys in. And of course, we're on a little delay, so we're not
All right,
going
here
to
we
get
go.
to see this
I'm
happen.
watching it. Here we go. I'm so excited.
Can we live stream the chaos in the chat as this happens? I don't know how that works.
Oh.
I don't think
it's
we
happening.
Oh dear God. Oh, there's blood.
Oh my gosh!
Humanity.
Oh, it's so much. I got neighbors knocking on the door. You all right? Oh. Oh. No, you're not. Sorry.
We got 2 more keys, so this is gonna be. Whew.
See, for the last one, we should do is just take all the alphanumeric
Oh dear God, that lady just got
numbers
stabbed.
and letters and just say them.
There,
like,
someone
throughout
has.
the whole
I repeat,
podcast.
someone has been stabbed in the live chat.
We're gonna scramble the letters at this next key, and then you have to put them in random order. And whoever gets it right, then you win. That's what we'll do. That's maybe the worst idea ever, but
This, by the way, this is great radio. Gotta say,
it's all action. It's
this
all
is
action.
great.
That's
This
right.
is quality entertainment, man. The vision, the audible story that's being told by us staring at a chat, just cannot be understated.
I have to say, Jordan, Homeworld Remastered Collection is old school PC game that's been brought by Gearbox Software up to date with HD assets and stuff. And they were kind enough to include us. Our subscribers had the opportunity to get early access to beta testing this game. And then those folks who participated got keys for the game from Gearbox. So like we have a lot of TR readers who already have keys. And in addition to that, they had a few extra left over that they gave us. And so we're going to give those out. We've given out 3 here. We're going to give out a bunch on the site and maybe find some other creative ways to cause chaos with them. But we should have, at the end of the day, a lot of TR readers who are going to be out there playing that game. That folks can, maybe we can get some matches going. Because there's a multiplayer component of this. You know, it's an RTS. And
Excellent.
people are wanting me to play them, but I've never played Homeworld, I have to admit. So I've got to learn how not to lose. How to lose in that game before we can do anything.
Right. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break while the referees clean the bodies off of the field. All right. Let's get back into the podcast here. Oh, we got someone talking in German. That guy definitely brought a knife. All right.
Hey, Jordan, I think now we maybe can bring on... We actually have another panelist waiting in the... waiting in the wings, but I don't know if he's ready yet. Jeff Campman's going to join us and talk about his Fractal...
I don't remember approving another panelist. I don't...
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
dude.
no, I don't... not feeling it.
It's on the agenda.
That's not just German, Jordan. Those are Kraftwerk lyrics. So, pay your respects.
Oh, here he is. No, let's bring Jeff Campman on. Good times.
I'm going to attempt to bring him on right now.
Excellent.
Yes.
See what I did there? I then made it sound like it was my idea.
It was. Thank you for thinking of that, by
You're
the way.
very welcome. You know, I love Jeff. He's a
Howdy.
he's a
Hey.
real champ. Jeff Campman, how are you, man?
Hey, you're doing great, Jordan. How are you?
Where's your
I'm
video,
well.
dude?
Put some pants on.
Why is... 1 second.
See, he's got to go put pants on.
Yes. Why is this not working?
That's
I
the,
guess I have to actually
that's the
tell it to
question we
stream it.
often ask.
There we go.
There he
Oh.
is.
Let's see here.
Wow.
Hey, there he is.
Welcome, Jeff.
Oh, you got books
Thank
on the
you.
wall behind you. What do you think?
I
You're better
do.
than us?
You gotta maintain appearances.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't read any of these books, but they're. I got some. Yeah, the number of books on the guy's wall, that says everything. That says everything you need to know.
There's a printer box back there too for extra cred of some kind.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, there's a box for like Windows XP somewhere over there that you just have on the shelf because why not?
Yeah, I've got
I
some
have books
old-
too. They're just
yeah.
in the other room.
I've got
so-
some Windows
big
XP
deal.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't have it visual for the like. You don't have it.
You're
it's not
right.
Part of visual.
You're right. It's
See, I see
mostly
there's
that's video cards back there. That. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So for those that don't remember, Jeff is an esteemed contributor to our site and one of the writers. Jeff, what's the most recent piece of content you've written for us for reference?
Well, today I just wrote a piece about the Motorola E, but we probably don't care about that.
We don't.
The latest feature review I did was Fractal Designs Define R5 case.
That's right. That's right.
Which that's where the agenda included him. See.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to talking about that. So give me about 10 minutes. We'll read it. I'll come back.
I will be here.
Okay. Let's move on. Jeff, just feel free to chime in as you see fit. We'll get here to your case here in a second. But
Sure.
I want to talk about something that's been pretty exciting. Now, Jensen Huang and I did a media training session after the latest podcast, Scott.
Oh, good.
After the 9/7 controversy, they caught wind of my talent, brought me in. I was paid in Shake Shack. That's how I got the meal tonight. Yeah, no, it was just the whole thing.
Serious
So he's
currency there.
Hey, I'll take it. Calories are calories. Could have paid for the cab, but I'll let it go. He did, however, speak out on the GTX 970 controversy. This is something we've discussed again in depth. Essentially, a faux pas of what could be on the lighter side considered a misunderstanding, and on the more darker side considered to be sort of blatant misrepresentation of product features and outright lying. Jensen Huang has now commented on the issue. So you covered his comments, and he seems to be pretty clear that this is not going to ever happen again, correct?
Yeah, well, what he says is he's not apologizing for the actual memory configuration, the way it's set, as this was, by design, and Nvidia has made that very clear, and we've covered that in the past. It's supposed to work this way, and it's actually good. He says that it has 4 gigabytes of RAM, even if the last half gig is a little bit slower, because you can put rarely access data in there, and then you still have more memory to run the game. But he's apologizing for the lack of transparency about the way it works and about the performance. And he says, we won't let this happen again. We'll do a better job next time.
Apparently, there's a class action lawsuit associated with this whole debacle as well. What's that?
It's not yet a class action lawsuit. The lawsuit has been filed, and it's up to the judge to decide if it gets class action status, and it may or may not go to court. So we don't know yet, but yeah, there's definitely some people want to take legal remedies. So yeah.
Well, it's I don't know if it's really some people wanting it. I mean, there may be some people out there who do, but I think it's really a lawyer who got involved because he thought some people would want it. Right. This is what's happened, and he's filed. I think a suit has been filed to start. Like, I think there was it North Carolina?
Yeah, California, I think.
No, Northern California. It names Nvidia and Gigabyte as defendants.
California.
Yeah. So California, Carolina. We don't. Somewhere else.
Both places I lived.
It was somewhere Jordan grew up. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
But
no, it's fine. I mean, it's really disrespectful, but I can tell.
I mean, okay. I was just thinking of you, Jordan. That's all I'm saying.
I'm teasing. Yes, I appreciate that.
But yeah,
it is in Northern California.
Right. And anyway, this is not going away as easily, I think, as Nvidia might have hoped, because they did mess up by communicating this. And the other thing about this, Jordan, that you kind of have to think about is when they launched the GeForce GTX 960, which they did right before the 970 stuff completely blew up, and they admitted the memory configuration was what it is. They told us basically, we've sold over 1 million GM204 based cards, and you have to think the majority of those are 970s, right? And then, unofficially, I think it was nearly twice that. So you're talking about a lot of people, and anybody who looks at that and says, this is not right, you've got a disgruntled customer, and that's potentially a lot of disgruntled customers.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, it's such a weird thing, because I still think that you have a great product for the price there. is not as great as it was because AMD went and cut prices on the R9 290, which we just talked about. I could see some people wanting to play the trade game here because they could now have a slightly faster card in the R9 290 for less money, right? But the GTX 970 is still a decent product. But it's not quite what we thought it was in terms of the L2 cache size, the ROP count, and the memory bandwidth and memory capacity. I mean, the capacity is all there, but not in the way that we understood it to be. So, I don't know. It's just, I play games on the 970. I've done this. I've done it since the review. I've used them. It's a good product still. And so I have a hard time seeing people being really upset, except for kind of just on principle, or if they have a really specific use case where there's a problem. And I think that the on principle is going to be a lot more common than the use case right now.
This is a dumb question, but just satisfying my own curiosity. Is the definition of class action the idea that one person files the suit, and then if they win, the decision applies to then a larger number of people? Is that kind of the crux of that whole issue? Is the idea is one person is going to lead this flag, and if this turns into something, anyone who owns this product can then claim money?
Yeah, like members of the class are all due compensation.
Got it.
And so, the way this winds up working out almost universally is like a lot of money can be awarded in a class action suit where there are a lot of customers, right? The lawyer who's done all the legwork legally will take home a nice check. And the members of the class individually will get like $10 each, right? Because there are too many of them for usually the payouts aren't that great for the class members.
And that's not even enough for Shake Shack. So
no, it's and so it turns out to be like there's an incentive for lawyers to pursue a class action suit like this because of the way their compensation structure is set up. It's not necessarily that great of a deal for the consumers involved, and Nvidia may wind up deciding to settle something like this. They may decide to contest it. The other thing they could do is try to kind of like buy people off. They could offer a free game as compensation for people who bought a GTX 970 prior to the admission of this memory news, right? And then if you accept it, then you sort of indemnify Nvidia from any other liability in the process. So they could take that route to make sure that the class action suit doesn't have a lot of teeth. I think that's, I don't know. I'm just thinking that's a strategy that they could pursue. I'm not saying they will, but something like that may happen.
So this seems to just be the bad news episode. Samsung investigates A40 Evo slowdowns, prepping another fix. This was Jeff's story. Who's cogent enough to speak to what's going on in this particular piece?
So the 840 Evo was the first MLC drive for consumers, multi-level cell, so it's 3 bits per cell. And the great thing about MLC is that it's cheap, right? Because if you store more bits per cell, you can have more capacity for less money. And Samsung did a pretty good job on the engineering from the standpoint of making sure the performance was still decent. However, triple level cell flash is less reliable than MLC, which is 2 bits, or SLC, which is 1 bit per cell, and it hadn't really been deployed in a large number of, like a consumer product in large numbers before. And what happened was several months back, 840 Evo owners discovered that data that had sat on their drives for a while and hadn't been accessed was inordinately slow to read. And so it was this kind of weird problem that had something to do apparently with the way that controller interacts with the triple level cell NAND flash. They issued a firmware fix eventually to address that problem and supposedly fix it. And then Jeff actually, I think, broke the story in conjunction with some forum posts about the fact that readers were still seeing some of our readers were still seeing slowdowns on the 840 Evos with the firmware fix. And Samsung kind of got back to us after we presented the data that said, hey, this isn't good. This is on a drive that's had the firmware patch. What are you going to do about it? And they said, hey, we're looking into it, and we may have another fix. And they've got a little statement here. And the thing about the statement that's a little weird is, instead of saying, we're going to have a firmware fix and we think this will be the one that will just really take care of it, they said that they're going to have a tool to address the slowdown in the Evo's sequential read speeds. This tool effectively and immediately returns the drive performance to normal levels, et cetera, et cetera. So that means, I think, that there will be like a Windows program that you have to run in order to go out and touch the data on the drive or do whatever it needs to do to get the stuff in the right state to where it can be read quickly again. That may not be the most satisfactory answer, but it is another way of addressing it. And so, I think a lot of people are just kind of not pleased with it because, the triple level cell stuff has not turned out to be enough cheaper than MLC flash to be worth this much headache. And, if you own one of those and you have this problem, it's not great. So I think it's similar to the GTX 970 issue in that there are a lot of Samsung 840 EVO SSD owners. It's a good product by all other indications. Good performance for the price and etc. But that means you have a lot of people who are potentially dissatisfied, and so they've got to be really careful how they manage that. And we're kind of waiting to see what comes next. But the fact that we had like a chapter and we thought it was closed with the firmware update, and now it's back, is really a pretty negative thing.
Can we talk about something positive? I was getting kind of sad. What really cheered me up? Can we talk about the Fractal design define R5 case?
I think we can.
Jeff?
I'm ready to go.
Oh, man. Do it with a smile, man. Let's talk about this case. Well, this is what form factor is this?
The Define R5 is a ATX mid tower.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like it's pretty much the standard case size these days.
Right. It also, aesthetically is not wildly creative. It's sort of going for a very sleek. I'm just going to start with the aesthetics. We'll drill down to the features. But
sure,
it's a gray design. It's got the flat front door. It's got the ports on the top near the power button. It is very sort of subtle. So I have to imagine for a case like this, its specialness, if there is any to be found, is really in how it's constructed, some of the nuances of its design internally and sort of functionally. And is that an appropriate assumption?
Yes. It is a very just straightforward looking case on the outside. There's just not much to say about it. It's a box.
Right.
But it's a really well designed box. The front door, so the Define R5 is supposed to be like a silent case or a silencing case, so it's got a lot of noise canceling features, including the front door, which is it's kind of unusual these days for cases to have doors, but this one does. So basically, all of the really interesting stuff is hidden inside. But it's if you're not a fan of blue LEDs, or crazy Transformers-esque teenager-styled cases, this is it's great.
Yeah, it looks nice and subdued, and you can get it.
Yes.
You can get it with or without the window, right?
Yes. You can get it in windowed or non-windowed versions. You can get it with an all-black finish. You can get it in an all-white finish, or the one I reviewed, this titanium finish. It just adds a faux brushed metal front door. It's just plastic, but it looks nice. It looks authentic. It fooled me at first. So, I like it. I don't like, cases that scream, look at me. I don't like eye-searing LEDs. So I actually have my main system in it now. It's sitting right here next to me. So
I mean, I've long maintained that having light up fans inside a case is the number one way to impress, particularly female guests to anyone's living space. If you have it's particularly like a red, because red is the color of love. It's a red light up LED in a case. You are home free. Home free.
uh,
All right, so continue.
I don't know about that, but
All right.
um,
In the comedy world, we call this yes and. You go, yep,
yes.
and we move on. All right, here we go. So tell us what makes it special. I'm seeing little things, Jeff. Like, for instance, the fan at the front. You've got two fan bays for your standard 80 millimeters or 120 millimeter.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're actually 140 millimeter. They're pretty big.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so big 140 millimeter fans.
Yes.
Even the fan blades look like they have that chop in them where they cut away part of the blade as a way of, I'm assuming, making it quieter. I mean, a lot of little things like that.
Well, yeah. They're trying to tune the acoustics of the fan to make it less, disturbing. And with these fans, like it's really minor. There's only like a couple notches on the trailing edge of the fan blades, but it really,
Right.
whatever they did, I'm not going to claim to be a fan design expert, but whatever they did with these fans it works. These are really quiet fans. They're some of, if not the quietest fans I've used or experienced with a case.
Mm-hmm.
So they're good. They're certainly, whatever they did, it worked. So, but yeah, it comes with one 140 millimeter front fan. It's got a removable filter to keep the dust and cat hair out. And then just one more 140 millimeter fan in the rear, which is, it's kind of an unusual configuration these days. It's neither positive nor negative pressure. Positive pressure meaning you have more fans blowing air in than are blowing out. That's kind of the preferred configuration for keeping dust and stuff out of the case because it can't, it just gets blown out. It can't go into the.
I'm sorry, more air blowing out than what was the ratio of that?
Positive is more air blowing in than out. So like
Yeah,
any
it prevents air from
Got it,
getting
because a
sucked in
negative,
through
right?
the-
Got it. A negative thing would
Right.
suck stuff into it. This keeps it pressurized, so to speak.
yes.
Got it.
So, but the thing is, it's neither of those things by default. It's just like because you have one fan blowing in, one fan blowing out. It's just even.
Right.
So, but it's got dust filters.
I see that along the bottom, for instance. That's an interesting.
Yeah, I don't really understand the logic. I guess like there's a full length filter on the bottom, and there are two fan mounts at the bottom of the case. So I guess if you turn your PSU over so that the fan is drawing air in from the bottom, that filter helps.
Well, that's
Yeah,
how you're supposed to install it, isn't it?
I would say that's how it works. It sucks
Well,
in
yeah.
and then pushes out to the back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I mean-
right. So what you're saying is you're wrong. I'm kidding.
Yes. I mean, I probably am, but
Okay. So all right. So then you've got padded side doors, so it
Well-
gives additional soundproofing.
right. So, like the front door, the backing of the front door, and the side panels are all covered with this foam, this really dense, supposedly sound deadening foam.
Right.
Like this this is a really heavy case. This is, I said like in the beginning of the review, but it's like 25 pounds for a mid tower, which is absurd.
Wow.
Part of it is, like the last case that we really universally recommended. Like I built mine in my present system in the Corsair Obsidian 450D, which is like about the same size, but it weighs 10 pounds less. So like between all the foam and all the metal, a heavy case is good because it dampens vibration. But that it just
Sure.
really.
Well, and again, if I'm showing this case to my female guests, I will often say it's heavy. Chew. No, seriously. No. Try to pick it up. No. Try to pick it up. No, try. Just try it. Pick it. See, it's heavy. Yeah. It's heavy case. Really impresses them. I'm fascinated by the way it's mounting hard drives. There's obviously the 5.5-inch bays, or is it 3.5-inch bays
It's
for
3.5 inch
3.5.
bays for the typical mechanical hard disk.
Yeah, but then there's SSD mounts behind the motherboard backplane. I've never seen that
Yeah.
before.
It is. I think it's becoming more common these days. Like the Obsidian 450D has those too, but they're not as nice. They're just like plastic bays that are just tacked onto the back of the motherboard. These actually come off, but you have to screw drives into them, which I didn't like, and we can talk about that more in a minute. But I mean, that location is good. Um, there's like a ton of space behind the motherboard too. So like, and really the really distinctive thing about this case, I've never seen this with any other case, is the way that the motherboard tray is actually inset a little bit. Like there, it's stamped such that it's sunken relative to the rest of the left side of the case. So they squeeze out a few more millimeters of clearance for like CPU coolers and extra wide graphics cards that way.
I'm not following. What do you mean it's sunken?
Okay. So if you look at the side or the first image on the second
Oh, I'm
page of the
sorry.
video,
I'm looking
yeah,
now.
that's okay.
Yes, I see this.
Yeah.
Isn't that
So,
where? Isn't that about? Wouldn't it normally be about pressed up against that back wall like that?
well, no, most manufacturers just, they have that panel flat. Like there's no dish to it or
Huh.
anything. It's just, it's 100% flat, and then whatever space is behind the motherboard tray is just whatever space there is. Um, but they deliberately designed it this way, I guess, just to like, this thing can take like 180 millimeter tall air coolers, which is a really
Yeah,
tall. It's like the very biggest ones. Um, but it makes for a lot of extra space, and I haven't seen this in any other
that's very
case.
interesting. Now,
So,
how do they then fit SSDs behind that, though? I mean, I guess SSDs are very
well, they're
thin,
still
but
now, yeah, SSDs are really thin. They're only like 7 millimeters thick, I think,
right.
depending on the
Between
standard.
seven
But
and 7 and 9, I think. Yeah.
yeah, but there's plenty. So the other thing I really liked about this case, like behind the motherboard tray, there's a ton of room. So even with that dished
That's
panel,
very interesting. Yeah,
yeah, so that it kind of forms a channel for the cables to go around. But
I see
that
that.
that
Yeah,
bottom area, like, has about an inch and a half of space, which is really, really generous, compared to most cases. I think I compared it to the Silencio 652S that Cyril
hmm
reviewed, and
Mhm.
neither that case nor the 450D have nearly as much room. So that, I mean, that was the other thing that really stood out. Is they've really thought about, I guess, how modern system builders build their machines, and they designed the case accordingly. Like the other thing, there's even more room behind the hard drive trays, so you could actually conceivably fit all eight, or populate all eight of those bays and get the power cables and SATA cables in there, and you wouldn't be coming anywhere close to the limits of the case, I don't think. Like you wouldn't have a bundle of cable that was pushing up against the side panel or anything. It's kind of hard to see, or get a feel for that without the case in front of you. But
interesting.
they didn't just throw eight drive bays into this thing and not think about how it was going to work. So
Hmm.
So let's talk
Yeah.
about
What
the.
impressed me too is
Oh, go
the.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what impressed me too is the Velcro straps that they have for cable management. That's pretty uncommon. Like usually you get like little plastic ties, which are
yeah,
great
Yeah,
to use once, but then you have to cut them. So these guys would be reusable.
right. So yeah, the Velcro straps are really nice too. Um, I Again, it's the first. I know we've never reviewed a case by them before, but Fantex includes these on their cases as well. So,
Mm.
but this, I mean, either way, it's really good.
so
So
let's
then,
get down to brass. If I may, can we get
yeah,
down to brass tacks and talk about how quiet and actually cool this case is?
sure. So I mean, in my measurements, like it was the quietest case I believe I've ever tested.
Wow.
So the silencing features work. Like at idle, it's only like so this case has a built-in fan controller too. So if for some reason, if you hate motherboard fan control, you should be buying a motherboard with fan control on board. But if you really want to, you can hook it up to you. It has a three fan controller you can hook the fans up to.
Hmm.
So on low, like with an air cooler installed, so it has these panels up top, and those were in place. Those are backed with noise deadening foam. It didn't get any louder than 36 decibels, which is, it's really quiet. Like most rooms are 35. I think the noise floor for our sound meters is about 35 decibels. Our calibrated meters, mine goes lower, but that's because it's a smartphone. So like in normal use, you wouldn't even notice this thing at
Wow.
idle, most likely.
Yeah, I think the
Um,
sound
So
floor depends
what did you
on the environment.
compare it to again?
Sorry, we're
Sorry?
both talking at him. I was just saying I think the
Sorry,
noise
we're
floor
all talking
depends on the
over each other.
environment.
One at a time. Scott
Okay.
Yeah,
Watson.
Collisions detected. Let's try again.
dude. I just said the noise floor depends on the environment, dude.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the meter. So
Well,
So
yeah.
what is it? So Scott Watson, what you've done a lot of this stuff. What's a typical noise floor?
about 35 decibels in an average room. Like that's what it is where I
Right,
am.
that's what it's getting at.
Yeah, it is around
So-
33, 35 depending. And I don't even know what's depending on. Like it's a basement. I do this testing late at night. Everything seems quiet to me, but there's noise all the time in most environments. And if you've ever been into like an anechoic chamber or a room that really isolates sound, it is a freaky experience because you hear like kind of tinnitus, and it's just you're used to having that background noise. Anyway, so
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
well because the thing is, if you think of sound as what it is, which is waves of air, then you realize there's always a little bit of pressure on your ears. So I have to imagine if you reduced all that sort of, I don't know, the pressure in the room, so to speak, would be kind of weird.
it's a little disorienting. So anyway,
Yeah.
that was just a
So,
point
yeah.
about testing. But Cyril, I
Right.
think you had like a relevant actual question to ask.
Yeah, Jeff, I don't think you mentioned what case you actually compared the Define R5 to
right.
your testing.
So, right. So since we've recommended Obsidian 450D, Corsair's Obsidian 450D for a long time, and I own one. I use it as a baseline in a lot of my reviews, so I put my system into that case as well. And so the Obsidian 450D is a more open case. It has a mesh front panel. It has a completely open top panel. So there are just more ways for noise to escape from that case than there are with the Define. So like at the same set, well, okay, so the Define or the Obsidian doesn't have a fan controller though. So I hooked both of these cases fans up to the motherboard, and with that setup, the Obsidian was about anywhere from 2 to 3 decibels louder at idle,
Hmm.
I believe.
Was it
So-
noticeable?
Well, I want to say yes, but that may just be bias. I think
Like
especially
racial bias or what?
yeah, the
No? Okay.
no, I try to be neutral, but the
So do we all.
so yeah. So it's just like there are very like noise, the concept of noise, like it's not just a broad spectrum thing with PCs. You have various fans that spin and hard disks maybe that spin up, and like high frequency noise is more annoying, I guess, to me
Sure,
than low
sure,
frequency noise.
and the quality of the sound, like not just the frequency, but like if you have this kind of rough sound instead of something that's more even, then that
Yeah.
can be more annoying. It's hard to know subjectively, like the decibel meter is giving you a number, and
Right.
what you're experiencing is really different. And when you're talking about what you're talking about here, like 2 or 3 decibels difference,
Yeah.
isn't it just like that's really hard to perceive, given
Right.
all those other inputs that you're thinking about, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's a meaningful difference. I don't think it is. But I will say this, that the like the hard drive mounts for both of these cases are like right up against the front door or front panel. And with the more open front panel on the Corsair case, you can hear, like, it's much more evident when a hard drive is spinning up or spinning down, or, just making the noises that hard drives do, whereas all the fans and the solid front panel and the Define R5 do keep that down a lot better, I think. And the Define also has, like, because drives, I guess I hate 3.5-inch drives from a noise perspective. They're terrible, but the Define also has like rubber grommets that go into the drive trays, and you screw the drives into them using that. It's supposed to keep vibrations down. It kind of works, but this, it's not a perfect system. Some vibrations can still get into the case, and you get this buzzy noise. But that's common to all the cases I've tested. So that's more noticeable than anything. more than any 1 or 2 dBA change in sound pressure level in general. Is just like when these sympathetic vibrations excite some loose bit of the case and make it go, buzz.
We're
Yeah,
all
the only cases that didn't do that I ever tested, I think, were the Antec P180 series. Like they had those layered sort of side panels. I think they had like a plastic layer in there. Anyway, the materials
Right.
made it so that it didn't make those vibrations, but every
Yeah.
other steel case pretty much does that. Yeah.
I guess, but we're being pretty picky here. I mean, I've had cases that, like back in the day, really vibrated when a hard drive was sitting in them. And when you have rubber grommets and things like that, you're not talking about something that you notice a lot, right? It's just occasional, right?
Well, I mean, I would, it's pretty obvious when it starts to go in this thing. Like I said, you can stop it from doing it by tapping it, but it's really obvious. It's a pretty like single pitched buzz. It doesn't,
right. So
it doesn't eradicate I mean, I think the grommets reduce the vibration, but they don't eradicate the problem.
right. Yeah, I get that on my 450D sometimes, but what is it, 300D? I don't even know what model I have. But yeah, I get that every once in a while. But honestly, it's really pretty quiet. Now, what about so cooling or noise wise? It's at least comparable, is what we're hearing.
Yes.
To our favorite, right? And
Right.
what about cooling wise? What's the performance of that look like?
It is also about on par there. Like there are some temperatures where the define is, or there are some like parts where the define keeps things like a couple degrees Celsius cooler, and where the obsidian will be a couple degrees hotter, and then with other parts it switches. So there's not like, even though it's down, like the Obsidian 450D has two 140 millimeter intake fans, and the Define has just the two fans in total. Like even being down a fan, the Define has comparable cooling performance. So even with all the silencing foam and stuff, I don't think heat buildup is a concern.
Right. So it's decent performance on cooling and sound, which is good.
Yes. Right.
So the question then is, what do you think overall compared to our favorite?
Well, I think like just building in it, like this isn't, you can't capture this in numbers really well, but just building in it, like all the the extra space behind the motherboard, like just all the features make it really easy to build a system in the Define. I think just a little bit easier, just a little bit nicer than in the 450D. And another example, like the water cooling and the 450D goes right above the motherboard. Like if you install a radiator, so it has more potential for interference, but Fractal made the case wider and they offset the radiator mounts so that it doesn't interfere with motherboards and you have more space. And just little touches like that, like throughout the review process, I was just working with it and you'd have these little aha moments. You'd see why they did a thing. And it was just like, oh, that's nice. So, I mean, I think it's just that little bit better than the 450D.
Wow.
And just in terms of ease of use and, livability as cases go.
And that Corsair cases are usually really good.
Yeah. And that's no small thing. Like I really like the 450D. I don't think it's a bad case by any means. So, the fact that Fractal has, even exceeded it a little bit, it's really impressive, I think.
So, Cyril, that means a turn in the system guide, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, we're going to recommend it. And, the system guide is already written as we record on Thursday night. But yeah, it's in the new mid-range build.
We should mention,
we're recommending it.
We did consider this case editor's choice worthy, which is a very rare feat.
So. Yeah, I don't know what gave you the authority to make that call, but
well, nobody said no. So,
well, I mean, you're an editor and you chose it, so that
I tried
counts.
to make Shake Shack an editor's choice, and Scott vetoed that, and I was just like,
that's totally not true.
I mean, come on, man. Like, at least silver. And then he's like, no, we don't do food. And I was like, well, I eat food. And it's a whole thing. I'm working on it. I'm putting in an appeal in the appeals court. which is essentially Cyril and Jeff, but they don't care. It's the whole thing. Anyway, Jeff, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this review. It is fun that we, for as long as I've been doing this podcast, we've been talking about PC hardware. We just can't. We love our clicky keyboards and quiet / well designed cases, but does anyone kind of feel like PC cases are a bit like something where it's like it's kind of like motherboard fan controllers? It's like there's no question as to what is really some of the optimal things to do. So the fact that people still get things wrong is kind of like, why are, you know what I'm saying? I guess a lot of variety and choice and style and whatever, but these are just really basic things. Make it quiet, make it well designed, make the room for cable management. So when someone gets it right, it's not that they're being wildly innovative. It's just like, okay, finally someone did it right.
Yes. And even this case is not perfect. There are things that, they iterate, like the Define has been through a bunch of iterations. So I'm hoping they find a way maybe to dampen vibrations more. But, for what I ask of PC cases, and I'm really picky about cases, it's really close. It does 90% of the things I want it to do.
And look, things have gotten better. I mean, my first PC case back in the day, it was like an unbalanced washing machine. You know, it would just kind of shake across the floor, just kind of jumping. And I realized the fans were unbalanced. But you live and learn. Jeff, appreciate it.
Okay, have a good one, guys.
No, you don't have to leave. I was just saying we're just moving on.
No problem.
You're welcome to leave if you need to go.
Oh, sure.
Get on with your.
Yeah, in fact, I'm sorry. Can you leave, please? Come on.
but you're welcome to stay. So it's really up to you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll stay on. I have actually a couple of new pieces of hardware we can talk about that haven't been premiered on the site at all. So
interesting. Maybe we'll tease that later in the show.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about the BX100 and MX200, although this is Jeff's review, and I don't know, guys. I mean, are we really qualified to talk about this?
I could totally talk about it, but
let's differentiate the Jeffs.
Yeah, this is Jeff Gazer's review, which Jeff is not here. I could totally talk about those, but let's talk about the AMD Carrizo APU.
I think that's even better.
That is actually what we were going to talk about before the Define R5, and we didn't.
We didn't, and
that's okay. I really don't. Whatever.
Well, Scott, I think we need to finally on this podcast give you a chance to talk.
Yeah, because I never do. It's terrible. It's a burden I carry.
All right, APU.
APU. Yeah.
APU. What this is AMD's fancy word for CPU, right?
Yeah, it is. And Intel calls them CPUs still with integrated graphics, but AMD decided to call them accelerated processing units because it wasn't confusing enough all the other things you have to keep track of in technology.
Hey, when it's performance versus branding, the PR people always win.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I think they think it makes sense because for them the strong suit that they have to play is the Radeon graphics.
Right.
And
that makes sense.
Definitely not the Bulldozer processor core family. So
let's talk about Carrizo then. This is the code name for the next generation of APs for notebooks and convertible PCs. So this is going to be on the sort of fast and light side of things, is it not?
Yeah, this is kind of AMD's answer to Broadwell. Intel has this lineup of chips that it ships into laptops and desktops that are like dual and quad core and range from 15, 17 watts all the way up to 95 watts. And AMD's APUs counter those. And they both have integrated graphics. They both have integrated PCI Express. They've integrated more pieces of a PC system over time. And this is the next generation from AMD. It replaces the Kaveri chip that we've already reviewed before in the A10 7800, A10 7850K, various A5 or A8 and A6 iterations of that. AMD also has low power APUs that compete with Intel's Atom-based stuff, but this is more of the higher performance than that. So it's a bigger core and more powerful graphics and all of that. And Carrizo is a chip that is, I guess it's maybe late, but I'm not sure what the original schedule was, but it is intended to replace Kaveri, and it's looking now like it's going to ship in laptops and convertibles mid 2015. So I expect around June, the Computex timeframe, we'll start seeing things beginning to appear. And AMD has had some trouble, Jordan, especially in like the North American market, getting
Right.
design wins where there are laptops widely available that are good products, that are interesting products, that are based on their chips. They haven't had enough of those, and they're really trying to be aggressive on that front. And at the same time, they have to pursue what Intel has been doing, which is driving down power levels over time.
Right.
And when Intel first made that move into ultrabooks, AMD really didn't have a suitably competitive product that could get into that 17-watt ultrabook power envelope, right? And so AMD hasn't been able to like go into the same chassis and really compete. And so you've got these like clunky-looking AMD-based laptops that are usually cheaper competing against these sleek ultrabooks. And then this has been a seller. And so they haven't had that. So Carrizo attempts to get AMD. They're really focused on the. They say their power band is like 12 to 35 watts for this chip. They're really focused on, especially I think that 15-watt optimization point when they made this one. So they've updated everything in the chip with the latest AMD technology. So it has a newer x86 CPU core called Excavator. It has somehow mysteriously updated GCN graphics. We don't really know a lot about them. And it has a UVD video decoder block, that's sort of a Radeon thing, that handles H.265 video, so it can decode 4K in real time without the CPU having to do that. There's a hardware block that can make that happen. And then it has the features for what AMD calls HSA, the Heterogeneous Systems Architecture, which is their model for accelerating computing tasks by using the GPU and the CPU together in a way that's sort of semi-transparently programmed to just use the best available processing resource. And they kind of updated all of that stuff. What they have disclosed this week, and what I've kind of written up here, Jordan, is some of the techniques and things that they have done to take this chip that used to, like the prior generations have ranged up to like 100 watts, down to 15 or so, and they were sort of less optimal at 15. They've now tried to optimize for that 15 watt to 35 watt, especially the 15 watt power envelope. And so they made some choices and done some optimizations, including the new Excavator core and all that, to get a good power efficiency at that point. And one thing that is kind of a challenge for them is the fact that they're competing using chips that are built on a 28 nanometer process. That's the best that they can get from their foundry partners, with Intel, who is making chips at 14 nanometers now. It's 2 process generations beyond what AMD has, and Intel is using what they call tri-gate transistors, or FinFETs is what they be called more broadly. But it's basically a different transistor that is more efficient and lets you get to smaller sizes and get benefits like higher switching speeds and lower power consumption, a lower voltage operation when you shrink. And the AMD's foundry partners haven't got there yet. They use traditional planar transistors that, in addition to having larger process geometries. All of that means that their chips are going to be a little bigger, they're going to use a little more power, they're going to run a little hotter, or they're going to have to compromise on clock speeds in order to fit into the same place that Intel's do. They've tried to counteract that by making some interesting design choices. So this gets super technical, Jordan, but I'm going to try to skip through some of it. This is about design, not architecture. Like the Excavator CPU architecture is in Carrizo, the Carrizo APU, and it does increase performance by about 5% clock for clock over the prior generation steamroller architecture. But that's not really a big deal in the grand scheme. The big deal that they've done with Carrizo is optimizing for that 15 watt power envelope on the 28 nanometer process. And that's really not architecture, it's basically what's called design. And so the idea here is that you do your circuit design in such a way that you get the optimization or the optimal operation at these low power envelopes. And so one thing that they did was they adopted some design libraries and some design rules that are essentially borrowed from the world of GPUs. And so they've got an example taking Steamroller and the Steamroller core and then putting in some extra features that the Excavator core has and switching to this additional or this different design library on the same basic 28 nanometer type of process. They shrunk the core by like 20 some percent. I think it's 23% less area. And the way they did that, you can kind of see here in the article, there's a cross section, a sort of side cross section of the stack of metal layers that they use to build the chip. And the top layers are much thinner in the GPU oriented stack. And so they can pack more transistors in. That's an engineering trade-off. And what you don't get without those thick layers is you don't have the tolerance for high frequency operation that you could get in the CPU stack. And so they kind of offer some curves in terms of like power and optimization. They show they've got a clear win over the prior generation Kaveri with Carrizo using this high density library. The only issue is that win kind of peters out when you get around the 20 watt per dual core module mark. And so this is a chip optimized for laptops that will be more power efficient in laptops, but actually they haven't articulated any plans for a desktop version, and the CPU cores built this way probably won't achieve the same clock speeds or do it as efficiently as the prior generation Kaveri. So this is AMD saying, look, we think we can win by tackling this market. We're going to build a chip just for that market, and they're giving something up, which is higher power bands. And there are several different optimizations that they made that go along with that. They made some choices in the way that they did their device selection for the GPU, the GCN GPUs, the Radeon GPUs, and those operate at lower powers. They probably would not run as high at higher clock speeds, but again, the power curves show goodness at lower power envelopes especially. And what that lets them do is in the 15 watt version of the chip, prior generation, they had 8 compute units, 8 CUs, and so that's basically like just the fundamental unit of the graphics processor, but they can only enable 6 and stay in that 15 watt power band. With Carrizo, they can enable all 8 and stay within the power band. So that optimization helps them there. They also have a couple of things that are adaptive voltage and adaptive sort of frequency scaling. And this gets into, Jordan, have you overclocked a CPU, right?
I have.
And so when you overclock a CPU, what you find out is that you can get to a certain clock speed on like maybe the stock voltage, and then you push past that and it starts to get unstable. And so in order to go higher, you've got to raise the voltage.
Or raise the voltage and keep the CPU cool. But yeah.
Temperature affects this a little bit, and when you raise the voltage, cooling becomes an issue because voltage squared determines power consumption of a chip as more than anything else in that equation. And so voltage is an extremely important thing to keep low, but it also is what you need in order for a chip to run at a given frequency without crashing. And so those are the dynamics that AMD's playing with Carrizo. So they did a couple of things to deal with that. One of them is that they said that most of the time when they build their CPUs, they have had to sort of build in about 10% extra voltage just because every once in a while voltage will droop. Just in the system, in its normal operation, it's not a perfect supply, and so you'll get droops. And if you don't build in what they call kind of guard band, some extra voltage of about 10%, then you could have crashes when the droops happen. But in their latest couple generations of CPU cores, they have built in real-time, super fast, like nanosecond level monitoring of voltage on the chips. And when there's voltage droop, They just cut the clock speed temporarily in order to deal with that. What that lets them do is not have that 10% of extra voltage there as guard band, because they have a different mechanism to deal with that. And Sam Nafziger, who's a AMD fellow who explained all this to me, said, these droops happen less than 1% of the time, so it doesn't really have a real negative performance impact to drop voltage or drop frequency in response to it, but it just saves you power. And so what they've done in Carrizo, they actually had this anti-droop adaptive clocking thing in Kaveri CPU cores, but in Carrizo they brought it into the GPU as well, and so they've got a power savings in the GPU on that front. The other thing is just for the CPU side, and this is even more advanced voodoo here. They have built into the excavator core, all around the core, 10 different little spots, Jordan, where they have like replica paths of like critical bits of logic from the CPU that are just there to be used to test under the current conditions, voltage, clock speed, temperature, etc., is it stable? And they will look at those paths and constantly evaluate their stability in order to determine what voltage the chip needs to be stable. And by using these little real-time monitoring modules all across the chip, they can know with certainty, or with pretty good certainty at least, what the lowest safe voltage is to operate at, and again build in less guard band and get lower voltage operation, which saves power. And so this is really interesting. I haven't heard of anybody else doing this type of thing. It was interesting when they put it into Steamroller. It's interesting. This is the first time in Excavator. This is interesting stuff. It's interesting when they did the other stuff, the voltage adaptive operation in Steamroller, but this adaptive voltage and frequency scaling, which is another step beyond with the real-time monitoring, is really fascinating. It's like what I do when I'm overclocking a chip and running like Prime 95 on it or something, and checking the voltage and seeing if it's stable. But it's just happening in little pockets all over the chip in ways that it's just for monitoring, and then they take that intelligence and optimize. So they also have low power standby, which is what you need so that your laptop can go to sleep like your iPhone does when you press the lock button, and then come back quickly, right? And they can use that. This is not as fast as what Intel does, where it's like active idle, constantly pursuing low power, because they don't have integrated voltage regulation yet. But they're saying that in like less than a second they can wake up from this state. So it's kind of along this power state, which they've just added, is similar to the old like PC laptop standby state, but it's something that wakes up about as fast as your iPhone does when you press a home button. So that's something that they needed to have in their mobile platform, and they've now added it. And it's just basically, the power manager turns off big chunks of the silicon and only wakes it up every so often as necessary. So that's what they've done in Carrizo to optimize for power. It's interesting stuff. It's a lot of it's design and going for a certain point. I kind of talked about in the article some about how they haven't yet got to the point they said they're going to, where they have like different blocks of IP, like a CPU, graphics, video decoder, memory controller, and then have a common fabric that links that all together. That actually isn't happening yet with Carrizo. It didn't happen with Kaveri, and Intel kind of was there with like Sandy Bridge, and other SoC makers out there like the Samsungs and Apples and those guys are doing SoC style design. AMD has said they're going to get to SoC style design, but right now they still kind of have like a Radeon glued to a bulldozer. And I think there are good reasons to do that. They want to get to market quickly. It doesn't mean they can't build a good product, but I think that probably we'll see that in the next generation when AMD introduces a new x86 CPU core. And Jordan, next year, I expect they'll replace Carrizo with a chip that has their brand new x86 CPU core. They'll finally, I think, be done with the Bulldozer family. Excavator, I think, will be the last iteration of that, and although it looks like it may be much improved, I think the new core, which is called Zen, is where they really start playing seriously to compete against Intel again. And they've talked a little bit about that in the presentation. Actually, they didn't talk about it, but they showed us stuff that tells you about it. So I kind of talk about that. If you look on this chart that we've got in the article here, there's a bunch of features that they put into this product matrix of things that are in development, and those are products, or the purple stuff here. And the purple stuff is what's coming in 2016. And 2016 probably means the APU after Carrizo. I don't know the code name for it, but it's the one with the Zen CPU core almost certainly. And they said they're going to have integrated voltage regulation. And then they've got a number of power management features that they've called out here, like per IP adaptive voltage, that almost certainly are just consequences of the fact that they've done integrated voltage regulation. That's a big deal because Intel did a integrated VR in Haswell. They're in the second generation in Broadwell. They're already doing it, and AMD is looking to catch up. At the same time, they drop a new core that could compete well with Intel's CPU stuff. In addition to that, they've got this advanced bandwidth compression stuff, which probably is what we saw in the Tonga GPU. It's for the frame buffer compression. It's very effective, and it looks like that didn't make it into Carrizo's GPU, but it probably will into the one based on Zen. So, although this is really about Carrizo, and Carrizo looks like it could be a product that could actually compete with Intel's 14 nanometer chips at 15 watts in ultrabook style or ultra thin style laptops, which is quite an achievement given that it's a 28 nanometer chip. It's still the case that this next generation based on the Zen stuff is where AMD looks to be playing a huge amount of catch up all at once, because of the things that they laid out here, because of the fact that it's a new core, and we're getting a little bit more of a glimpse of that. So we actually don't yet, Jordan. This is just kind of a preview of what's happening with Carrizo, and the product doesn't come out till mid-year. We don't have product names, pricing, real performance numbers. We just have this like vague energy efficiency chart that they provided that shows a big increase. I trust that there are good things coming. I think that the things they shared are interesting and can be quite effective. But all that stuff comes later when Carrizo gets closer to being a real product. We saw working silicon for this chip at CES. We're getting more insight now. I think they're doing this like rolling thunder thing with the PR. We'll probably have another one or two hits before the products come out where they share some more details about what this is.
Interesting. Good times, man.
I think that it's interesting because they went for laptops big, and I hope that means they get some design wins, because that's what they really need. They've got to stay in the market, and I don't know that there will be a socketed version of this. I think we might see it on the desktop in all-in-ones like the iMac, not necessarily the iMac, but like the iMac.
Right.
Could be the iMac. Maybe someday, I don't know. If they do really well, and if the Radeon graphics becomes attractive, maybe someday they could win that Apple business. I think that's a hard thing to do, but I don't know that we're going to see a socketed version of this, because given the amount of optimization they did for lower power points, I don't think it would translate all that well into 65 watts or above. I think that probably it's not better than Kaveri, which frankly was not that much faster than Richland. In some cases was a little slower, because they've been going for this low power target for a couple generations. And I think that they can get out of that. I think they can get back to higher power envelopes with Zen. But in order to do that, they need to be really competitive on architecture, not just design, and maybe on process tech. They probably need their foundry partners to get to like their 16, 14 nanometer FinFET based process in order to allow AMD to have the leeway to build a product that will scale further instead of targeting as directly as they have with Carrizo. But that's not where we are yet, and it looks like Carrizo could be reasonably competitive. We don't have any hard numbers yet, but it could be reasonably competitive, even though it's 28 nanometers and Intel's at 14.
Alrighty. I think we can call it an episode.
I'm done talking, dude. Do we have questions from the chat that we have missed?
We might have a couple. Hold on.
I don't see many. I think we just blabbed around about stuff, and then
There was a question we already answered about the A40 Evo, and then the biggest piece of vaporware Valve is currently working on, getting us to conspire against Gabe Newell, which I'm just not going to do.
I don't even know what they're working on. Like, they don't. So how do we answer that?
We don't.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think it's Wednesday at 11:15. So not for everyone else, but for me. Let's be honest, I matter. So, all right, this has been the Tech Report podcast. Before we go, Mr. Campman, can you tease out one of those items you're working on?
Oh yeah. So
And when I say tease,
listeners...
just the nuance is just
Sure.
mention it ever so shortly.
Yes, I'll be brief. So most of our listeners are familiar with EVGA. They're well known for their GPUs, but they sent me, they've recently expanded. Everybody else is expanding, so I guess they're expanding into like various other parts of PC hardware. And so they sent me a couple of their mice for review. They're getting into mice now for whatever reason. So this is the Torque X10 from EVGA. It's their first, I guess. I mean, you can't really see this.
No, I can.
But-
It's very exciting.
Yeah. So that's their first high-end gaming mouse, and it's just I'm actually really impressed by it. I'll be reviewing these shortly, but I took this out of the box and I was like, wow, this fits my hand perfectly. Like my current Logitech mouse does not. So like I'm really interested, but it seems like, they're not just playing around with this. It's not just a like we're going to put our brand name on something and put it on the market sort of thing. So but I'm already really impressed with it. I'm looking forward to reviewing them. So look for a review of those on the site within like the next week or so.
Excellent. I appreciate the teaser. Guys, we're getting some flack here in the chat room for a few things. Scott, you want to run through that and see if there's anything there you can answer?
So questions? Is that what we're doing?
Well, I no, we weren't originally, but
Right.
Someone's saying, can you tell us about the camera in the second gen Moto E? Can we?
I can try and venture a brief impression of
But
it.
have you used it?
No.
Let's not.
Okay. I mean, it's a $150
Jeff, I
phone.
appreciate the effort. I really do.
I mean,
Can you guys,
I'm trying.
can you guys have you seen that movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi? What's his sushi like? Well, I'm gonna guess it's good. It
it looks amazing.
It's the best you've had.
And when
It's
the
really
people
good.
when the people eat it in the movie, they look like they're enjoying themselves. So I'm gonna say it tastes great.
Hey guys, what's Joss Whedon like in person? I don't know. I haven't met him, but my guess is, let me take a crack at this one. Okay.
So when is the next system guide coming out? Is A Grenade asks. The answer to that question is tomorrow, as long as I get it edited. So hopefully that will happen.
Got it. So this is that refers to whether or not Scott wants to be lazy or work hard.
Are you going to review the Acer XB270HU? Asks Decoy11. And I believe that's their FreeSync 27-inch FreeSync monitor.
Oh, right.
And I think the answer to that question is, I sure hope so. Like we're working with AMD on this stuff, and they're, I think, gonna hook us up. So I don't know. I haven't got it like here yet, but I think they're coming, and that may be one of the first FreeSync monitors. Hopefully, we'll get our hands on it. So we're working on that.
All right. Well, in the meantime, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. You can always email us. You can email us, jdrake@techreport.com. Shoot us a shout out on Twitter. Our handles are in the show notes. For everyone else, the Tech Report team, for the podcast, I'm Jordan Drake saying so long.